Thank you for joining us again at Virtual Monsterama 2020. My name is Darren Bush. I'm your moderator for the panel I Will Not Fear, Another Dune Adaptation. I'm going to introduce our topic in just a second here, but I want to start by letting our panelists introduce themselves. First of all, I'm going to start with the gentleman currently to my left, which is Blue. Blue, introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Hey everybody, my name is Blue Cole. I'm a genre writer. Looking forward to it. Read Dune several times and looking forward to having a good conversation about it.
Excellent. And our other wonderful panelist, Kyle.
I am Kyle Mitchell, published poet and longtime Atlanta Con participant. Worked on several panels at several of Atlanta's cons. Also a proud member of the Dead Pirates of Sci-Fi fandom, the crew that run the con suites or green rooms and so forth at several of Atlanta's conventions. And I'm a big David Lynch fan, so I'm wearing his shirt right here. And so but interested to talk as well about all aspects Dune.
Yes. Excellent. And just in case anybody's wondering, I'm Darren Bush. I'm a science fiction and fantasy author. I'm also responsible for a lot of panels and content at several conventions in Atlanta, including Monsterama, of course. The one thing I do want to let you guys know before we get into this is some of you are familiar with the concept at the normal weekend conventions where we're in person of the Hangover panel. We are recording this early in the morning on a Saturday. So for us, this is the Hangover panel, although you may actually not be watching it in that time slot because we're virtual, baby. So let's start with one thing that I want to make very clear. We are going to talk about the trailer for the new movie adaptation of Dune. Because we're virtual, I'm gonna take advantage of that situation. I'm gonna say, okay, if you haven't seen the trailer, pause right now, go to YouTube, watch the official trailer, and then come back. Okay, good. So now that we've all seen the trailer, the first thing I want to ask is, how long ago was your first exposure to Frank Herbert's sandy, wormy universe?
You can go ahead, Kyle.
Well, I mean, just as a kid, I mean, I knew about the book, and I didn't read it, and I've never read it actually all the way through, or the several other books. But then going, of course, to the movie, seeing the movie, the David Lynch film, which I know is not a page-for-page adaptation of the book by any stretch. But then my wife, she is a huge Dune fan and has read, I think, all the novels, or at least most of them, and seen every adaptation. And so she's that girl, that nerd girl that has memorized the, I shall not fear, fear is the mind killer, that whole, thing, and can just recite it on, command. So that's, I don't know how I've made it without reading the whole because of that, living in the household with her, but that was my exposure.
Looking back at it, and I didn't realize this until 2020, until this trailer came out and I started to reread Dune this go round. Herbert died in '86, and I think I remember hearing about his death on the news, and he was the author of Dune, and I thought, oh, well, he wrote the story about the beaches. You have dunes on a beach, so he's the beach writer. Fast forward, I don't know, early 2000s, I was doing a job that I traveled a good bit, and in doing that, I was able to go to a lot of used bookstores, which means I was able to pick up a lot of neat stuff like that, vintage stuff that's just really cool. So I read it, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, and I thought it was pretty cool. And we'll get into some of that later, but I read it probably 15 years ago, and with this trailer coming out, I thought, okay, now it's time to read. So I just finished, talking about old covers, I just finished, I'm getting ready to start Children of Dune. I just finished Dune Messiah. So I remember his death. I've read the series once, And then I've also read some of the Outrigger novels. I've got, you can't really see it, but I got one of the Anderson and Brian Herbert trilogies back there as well. They don't show up as well because I don't have the big covers, but they're back there as well.
Mm-hmm. I was raised by a couple of science fiction nerds, and so my exposure to Dune was very early. They had both of my parents had read it, been exposed to it probably before I was born, although I don't know exact timeline. So Dune was one of those books that I was shown and tried to read way too young, not because it was inappropriate, but because it's a big read. It is we're talking like Tolkien kind of instant gratification. No, Frank Herbert did not know anything about instant gratification. You had to work for it.
Yep.
The vocabulary was incredible. He just built this universe that was so incredibly complicated. And so as a child, and I'm talking about like, I think I was 9 or 10 when I tried Dune the first time. And I know lots of people now are like, what? No, too early. But there were elements of it that really stuck with me as a sci-fi kid. And obviously, this is Monsterama. So if someone was to say to me, okay, well, Dune is more like traditional sci-fi, and I would go, okay, no, there are plenty of monsters in Dune. We'll get to that. There's plenty of elements of maybe not traditional horror, but there's plenty of horrific elements and suspenseful elements. And it is such a good story and such a good book that it kind of transcends that conversation for me. So I have gotten my hands on, as part of the book collecting, I've gotten my hands on about 7 or 8 of the hardbacks of Brian Herbert and Kevin Anderson. I've listened to the unabridged audio of the Butlerian Jihad trilogy, which is fabulous. That's another Brian and Kevin work. I've listened to that audiobook trilogy about 4 times because it's just so interesting. If you like the first Dune novel, that trilogy explains a ton of stuff that's important to the Dune story. So the Dune is one of those universes that just every year it gets a little bit bigger, right? If you think Dune is it like, oh, that's something long time? No, those books are still coming out. There's still relevant stuff going on, and the fact that they're making this new movie is just proof that it can still be relevant. Now we're not going to get into politics on this panel, but I want to really quickly say that if you are a human being on the planet Earth right now and you care about anything, Dune is still relevant for those. It still has those lessons built into it. It's one of those books where I go, did you guys not read Dune? Seriously, did you not read Dune? Go read Dune. Come back and we'll talk about this again. So let's talk about exposure to the films. Obviously, T-shirt guy here is aware that David Lynch made a Dune movie a couple of years ago with a, how would I put it politely, with a few creative interpretations. I think I'm going to start with the fact that the still suits didn't have hoods. And I think that was an interesting choice because, yes, you definitely want your actors to be able to have their whole faces exposed to the camera. You know, acting like this is tough. It's even for the greats, this is tough to pull off the acting. So one of the first things I noticed when I saw the movie was, okay, those still suits that they've got on in the movie would kill them in an hour. Those still suits are completely wrong. And for some reason, it reminds me of the armor from Starship Troopers. Same kind of thing. Is we can't see the actor through all that metal sheeting. What about you? What was your first exposure to the film? What do you remember from the first Dune movie?
This is my unpopular opinion time. I have not yet seen the sci-fi adaptation or the Lynch adaptation of the books. I have just read the books. I will remedy that before this one comes out. And part of the reason I've never watched them is I've just heard so many bad things about them. And to me, Dune has enough obstacles without having a bad adaptation thrown into it. So while I have not yet seen either of those two, I do plan on it before the new one comes out. But the new one, though, I'm really excited about that one. Potential and all that.
Okay. I like the fact that Blue, you're a purist. I'm fine with that. That's an okay answer here. Kyle, how about you?
Yeah. So I remember loving the David Lynch version, but I had not read the novel, so I didn't have anything to color, that or judge by. But I'll say this, one thing that I'm a sucker for sometimes is the heroism, and one thing that he did with uh, Lynch did with his version is he did exactly what you're saying. He made it more accessible for a universal audience and not just the purists, which of course we've heard in lots of other fandoms, right? That's been done. So he's not the only one to crucify a source material, but the so I remember really appreciating that. Like there's a lot of stuff that obviously doesn't really make sense if you think about it, from making it rain and all the these the weirding ways and all this stuff like that, weirding module and that kind of stuff, that was added to his version. But it adds for great heroic visual moments, or think about all the mini Doctor Who's, right? All the mini doctors. Matt Smith is one of my favorites because his seasons were more heroic and not as like bumbling, curious, kind of doctor. But he had their scripts and so forth were a lot more heroic, and they built up to these heroic moments, which you don't normally think of, for say Doctor Who as grand heroic. So that's what I remember liking from David Lynch's Dune was that it was kind of this epic, and if you think about it, it's just a few years after Star Wars and then Empire Strikes Back, and so there were some similar kind of elements as far as the directing and so forth, which I just saw a video that said, and I don't know if this is true, that apparently George Lucas had even offered David Lynch to direct Return of the Jedi. And I had not heard that before. But if watching David Lynch's Dune, you can see some of that style of that 80s Lucas kind of directing and plotting to where it gets to, or I guess on Zoom I should do like this, right? Is that for yeah. So but it's not like the book, but I think those are the main things that added to it that I fell in love with.
Yeah, there's some standout moments from the David Lynch movie that are in terms of Frank Herbert's vision are kind of ridiculous, but as a movie and as a form of entertainment, they're amazing in and of themselves. They're a separate entity. Like, having a young Sting be mostly naked in a knife fight, I knew a lot of people who loved that. A lot of people who were like, "Oh, I'll pay whatever it was for a ticket to go see Sting have a naked knife fight." I'm totally down for that. I'm pretty sure that's not Frank Herbert's original vision, but Blue, you were going to say something?
One of the things that I was thinking about over the last couple of days as I was reading Dune, there are a lot of corollaries to Star Wars and especially A New Hope. And I wondered, thinking about the publication history of it, I wondered how much influence Dune had on Lucas, because and I hadn't really had a chance to go in depth with it and put them side by side, but there are some strong thematic elements there. I mean, you've got the young Messiah, you've got the desert planet, you've got the chosen one, which is just a fantasy and sci-fi trope. But there's a lot of similarities I think that we could dig into, especially when you look at, and I'm sorry about my pronunciations. If my pronunciations offend you, I don't know what to tell you, just sorry. But the Bene Gesserits are very similar to the Jedi. They are just a whole lot of similarities there.
Mm-hmm. It's a very good point, Blue. I think that somebody in the background would say that Joseph Campbell would say that it's because the story structure is the same. It's the monomyth. There are a lot of similarities.
Yes.
Lucas was famous for letting his favorite influences get into his work, and we have reaped the benefits and the delights of that. So the idea that Paul Muad'Dib was a Jedi inspiration, that totally makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, really quickly before we move on, I want to say that I'd like to think that I could take credit for having presented 3 Dune fans with all very disparate points of view. It's a coincidence, guys. I can't take credit for that.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm in the middle. As I said before, I was exposed to the books probably too young. As soon as the movie came out, it had giant monsters eating spaceships, and I was like, "Hello, nerd child, going to that movie." And so the crossover between the visual interpretations and the book, I'm right in the middle between the two of you. I treat the movies, the TV shows, and the literature as different entities,
Mhm.
different interpretations of the same universe. Obviously, it's Frank's vision, so he wins all those arguments. But at the same time, I also want to point out, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because we don't have the time, is the audiobooks, the official audiobooks are fantastic audiobooks. If I'm trying to just get everybody into audiobooks because they're great. The gentleman, I think his name is Scott Brick, don't quote me. The gentleman who narrates the Butlerian Jihad trilogy is fabulous. He just does such a good job with doing the audiobooks. The audiobook that I found for Dune, the original novel that I used for prep for this panel, was a cast of like 15 people. So they had a narrator, and the narrator is I forget his name, but he's a well-known audiobook narrator. And then all the cast members were amazing, and I think they cast Scott Brick to play one part, and I recognized his voice instantly. It was great that he was involved. So like the Lady Jessica, when it was her dialogue, the actress who played her just knocked it out of the park. It was like a radio drama presentation, but it was still an unabridged version of the book. If you can get your hands on that, it's an amazing piece of art in and of itself, and it's the unabridged original Dune novel. So it's a great way to continue to expose yourself to the novel without having to sit down and actually sit with that. And it's a big, thick book. Even in paperback, it's a big, thick book. So I just want to remind everybody that the audiobooks are out there, and they're wonderful.
And Darren,
So,
I'm
yep.
like you. I always hold the book over here and the TV adaptation over here, or other adaptation over here. I mean, each storyteller is going to have their own vision. And while you're right, Frank Herbert's is the tiebreaker because he's the creator. But yeah, I always look at them as separate entities, which is one reason I wasn't as worried about not seeing the first two good or bad adaptations before this one. Eventually I will consume them, but yeah, you have to look at them separately, and you can't hold one against the other.
And I don't know what as an artist, as an author, creator, what Herbert was going for at the time. Was he really just trying to tell a story? Were the characters, the villains, the heroes actually like metaphors for something or people, or that kind of thing? How allegorical it may have been. I don't know that from studying Herbert. I don't know. So but you're right, Blue. Like with every interpretation, Lynch and then the sci-fi version, and now this new Denis Villeneuve version coming out, and I love all of his films, and he definitely does say a lot in his films without saying a lot, like obviously overtly, which is going to be an interesting take to see, but again, like you said, hopefully not too political, but a lot of times in film adaptations, it's saying something, right? For that generation or that time and place in history. And so it's curious, what this new adaptation will bring in that regard. But I don't know what Herbert originally intended. Maybe you do, Darren, what he intended, in his telling, why he wrote the original novel and then future novels and so forth.
Well, I hate to admit it, but I'm not sure what the overarching motivation was. Like, I know we've talked about Lucas already, which is an interesting comparison. We know Lucas's overarching motivation to do Star Wars. Frank Herbert can't possibly have written, was it 1,200, 1,300 pages over the first 3 or 4 books? He can't possibly have written those huge, thick novels without having some greater purpose. At least I don't think so. Not 55 years ago. I think that the subtlety of the politics and I think we're talking allegory. I think the allegory, the political allegory that he was building, even if he didn't realize it, I just assume that he was trying to make a statement. He was trying to get Americans to see something they were missing. And I think it worked. It is, as I said before, even today, I tell people, go read Dune. then come back and we'll finish this conversation. Because what he's saying in that allegory, I believe, is still relevant to the human existence and human interactions. I was trying to figure out how to sum up Dune, but basically it's us somewhere else. Just like a lot of great science fiction and fantasy, it's us, but it's couched kind of like the way Star Trek did this. It's couched in terms that don't immediately upset or offend us, so that he can sneak in the little pin jab, bink. He can go bink, and he can get you with, oh yeah, that's the way human beings act. Ooh, yikes. Or oh yeah, you threaten a mother's son, and that's exactly the kind of crazy stuff she's going to do to save her son, or whatever it is. There's so many layers of reality and human beings in these stories, that I that's my guess. I don't think it would be hard to Google it and find out, but just my gut says he was trying to teach us something.
Well, and two, I think that Herbert was writing in a time of just major upheaval and disturbance in the force, I guess, for lack of a better word. Late 50s, early 60s, because it was published in what, 65?
65.
And he
This
shot
is
it a while before
yeah.
that, so there was a lot of turmoil and whatnot going on, and even on the ecological side of it, there was a lot of work that was starting to be done, and people realized, hey, wait a minute, we're about to have these issues. This was in the run up to Silent Spring. So being able to bring in the ecological stuff and then show the human nature, and then the way that he wove religion into it, it took me forever to realize what a Zen Sunni was. And I thought, well, wait a minute, it's the Sunni religion plus the Zen Buddhism, and he just kind of mushed them together, which is what a lot of good writers do, is they like to take the current religious trappings and mush them together and throw it into the future, and hey, that's how religions and whatnot evolve. And the way that he layered all that, the human condition, the religious condition, which then of course led to the political condition, against the backdrop of an ecological disaster. But it's not really an ecological disaster, because it's an ecosystem that is working as it is designed to. Now, I haven't gotten deep enough into the books on this reread to have all the biology in my head about the makers and the water and the little makers and how all that happened. But I realized that he was creating, like you say, an allegory for the human condition and how we always have to change something. We cannot just be happy with normal human breeding. We got to change it. We can't just be happy with living in the present. We got to look into the future. We can't be happy just with normal travel. We got to go faster than light. So, and Dune, it's a desert. We need to make it more habitable. Let's make it green. Let's change the thing that makes it Dune.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, fix it till it is.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
And interesting, and y'all tell me if this is true, but what I've read is that the original planet Dune was a wet planet, and then apparently the sandworm or sand trouts, as they were brought there, and then they essentially took over the planet and so forth, and because of their biology, then created all this sand and got rid of all the water, which is basically poison to the sandworms, or Shai-Hulud, is that what they're called?
Shai-Hulud.
I just played the Dune board game the other night, and so I got to really get my hands on all of these things, and that was the first time seeing Shai-Hulud as the actual name for the sandworms. But yeah, so it was interesting, and actually I thought about even Prometheus, Ridley Scott film, and that, and how the beginning of it, they show the kind of original creation of the xenomorphs and stuff, and so it's interesting from a standpoint, like you said, Blue, in the 60s, early 60s, and environmental concerns back then, just like you had Dr. Seuss and the Lorax, book. And so it's interesting to see that, and I don't know that he planned this and when he was writing Dune, or until he kind of, worked his way back as the origin story afterward. But still, it's really interesting that you've got that universal story of religion, politics, environmentalism, colonialism, all that kind of stuff,
Hmm.
all wrapped up
Yeah.
into one. But because yeah, certainly if there are resources out there, all the governments of all the worlds will go for it to try and control it.
Oh yeah, yeah. The idea that the beginning of the very first book is right in the middle of what everyone in the galaxy knows is a political trap.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, as a kid, I was like, what? What? But as an adult, I'm like, yeah, yeah. The
Mm-hmm.
beginning, there's no point in him. Like they've gone back and done prequels, but the story starts right in the middle of the bad guys going, ha, I've created a trap, and the good guys going, oh, he set a trap.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beginning. That's the first chapter of the book. Is oh yeah, we're all going there to die. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
What are our alternatives? Yeah, well, our alternative sucks. So let's go and see if he can kill us all or not. What? it's but from history that happens. People have made these kinds of decisions and set up these kinds of machinations and had them work and had them fail throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're reading through Dune and you know anything about history, um, you could probably take a highlighter, like 6 different colored highlighters, and you can start highlighting proper nouns that refer to our history. The Zen Sunni that Blue mentioned is an excellent example of where he takes two things that really exist and goes squish. One of my favorites that I have not attempted to translate because I don't want to translate it is the OC Bible, because it's
Ah.
basically it's
Mm-hmm.
basically an updated version of the Catholic Bible, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
the Catholics that you guys are all thinking
Mm-hmm.
of now that I said
Mm-hmm.
Catholics. It's his thousands of years in the future
Mm-hmm.
Catholics. So
Mm-hmm.
he's taken everything that we're familiar with and he's just shoved it ahead
Mm-hmm.
15, 20,000 years, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like Arthur C. Clarke, like Isaac Asimov. He's modified it, he's grown it, he's put it in a petri dish and seen what it grew. And so you have, like, famously no computers because there was this artificial intelligence rebellion, which the humans had to squish, which is fabulous that they have human computers. They have no actual, like, what we think of as electronic computers. Um, the every single character in the book is a human being. Now there's a lot of subspecies. There's a lot of people who've intentionally or accidentally been transformed through thousands and thousands of years of space travel. But my understanding, and of course the Dune experts are yelling at the screen right now, which is great. We're glad to have you here with us in the audience. Feel free to yell at your
Really screwed
screens.
it up.
Yeah, I'm sure we've made mistakes, and that's part of the fun. Is
Comment
my
below.
yeah? Please comment.
Yeah.
Um, Let us know if you'd like us to come back next year and make corrections and follow up.
Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, Earth is in this is the universe with Earth in it, but it's tens of thousands of years later. Originally, when I was when the first movie came out, I heard people talking about Arrakis is Earth. No, Arrakis is not
No.
Earth.
Mm-mm.
It's a colony of what used to be Earth a long, long time ago. So one of the things I love about the Dune stories is that essentially every character is descended from an Earth human. If you go back far enough,
Mm-hmm.
there really truly aren't any actual aliens in the books. They're all humans that have either chosen a bizarre, strange path, or they have been jacked up, for lack of a better term, by politics, economics, genetic manipulation. It is hard to get through an hour-long discussion of Dune without mentioning the word incest. We don't have to
Mm-hmm.
go there in any detail, but the incest is part of this discussion. Again, historically accurate. The monarchies in Europe, so it's not that hard to see us in this, but also I think he's done a fabulous job of taking our world and making it feel like, yeah, this could end up being like this,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It's a mirror. I mean, it's just like all good science fiction. It's a mirror to our reality, be it in the 60s and the 90s and the aughts, in the 2020s. Science fiction holds up a mirror to humanity and says, look, this is what's going to be looking back at you in the future. And and there's just a lot of stuff that points to the human condition that is going to be true, whether it's in 2020 or in 2020.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
Kyle, anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, and if I'm correct, I've heard that in the novels, the Fremen are described as being dark-skinned people, and so that's another one of those for the David Lynch version. I mean, obviously it's Hollywood and in that time and
Mhm.
so forth, so you get white actors, but you don't do makeup to make whatever. But which is interesting to see in this new upcoming adaptation that you've got Zendaya, that is
Mhm.
darker skinned, and I don't know if all of the Fremen are going to be of like her complexion. We can't really tell. I don't think that from the trailer yet. But it looks like they're doing a better job at this, kind of avoiding the cultural appropriation or that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Trying to make them look more like what Herbert originally described them.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And that's so we're at about this is about the halfway mark in our time for the panel. And actually, Kyle, that's where I was going next. Is I want to talk about the trailer, um, because I think the trailer does an awesome job of reinterpreting the emotions of Dune, the
Mhm.
book, Frank Herbert's universe. I really think the trailer does an excellent job of getting you in the mood. Um,
Mhm.
Hollywood movie trailers tend to want to make you kind of go, "Hey, there's this thing, get some popcorn." No, this trailer makes you go, "Everyone is about to die. Do you want to watch?"
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, popcorn. Yeah, I want to watch. I think that, as you said, everyone is. It's hard to tell because the trailer is, and I'm assuming the whole movie is in that kind of not sepia tone, but that kind of dark gray
Mhm.
filter. Like, part of my brain when I watched it the first time was going, wait, did they do it in black and white? No, it's not in black and white, but it's in like gray and white. it's
Monochrome. It's monochrome.
it is the trailer is very dark and gloomy for the tone of this story. I thought that the way the trailer was put together, uh, I thought it was parts of it were very Hollywood. Explosion, person being upset, explosion. You're going to get that. That you got to sell tickets.
Yeah.
But also, I thought they did a great job of giving you little snippets of what's going to happen in the story. So if you've read the book or if you've seen the previous movies, you're like, oh, okay, that's in the movie. I
Mhm.
want that scene in the movie, and there it is. And then, of course, the worm shows up in the trailer. You don't get a great shot of the worm, but it's a pretty good shot of the worm.
Yeah, it's
And
awesome.
that's really and I'll admit it, that's one of the reasons I am here, is because holy cow, those worms are just amazing.
Mhm.
So okay, so I assume you guys have both seen the trailer.
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
All right, so this is the part where I try and shut up and let you talk about the trailer for a minute.
Kyle, I'll let you go ahead and talk about the trailer specifically because I want to talk about the interpretation
Okay.
of it.
Ah,
Yeah, I as well love the trailer. Of course, was leaked kind of early and then officially released and stuff. But finally, we're getting a Dune. I think with a young enough Paul Atreides that is more like in the books. So and
mhm,
Timothy Chalamet being just such a hot star right now and quality actor. They had a great cast. So that was fun to see all the cast and in their looks, for this new version. And um, yeah, like you said, it kind of reminded me of like Blade Runner 2049 and a little bit of that kind of
Mhm.
cinematography.
mhm,
Uh, and then you get to, of course, the sandworm, which is amazing, and then the close up of its kind of mouth that is different from the Lynch version, different from any other version.
mhm,
And it'll be interesting to see what if they show the variety of different worms, which if you look in a lot of the illustrations, art, and so forth that's out there of the different kinds of sandworms. So I'm intrigued by that. But just seeing that and its massive size, which I don't know, may even look bigger than the ones from the Lynch version. I'm not sure, but
yeah,
yeah, so it's very 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 intriguing.
yep,
So when I saw the trailer coming out, I knew that regardless of even if the trailer had been crap, I would probably be excited and want to watch it because it's a seminal sci-fi classic. I've read it before. Yeah, there may have been a couple of other adaptations that weren't quite as well loved, but that's one of those things that you want to see and you want to support, especially from the genre field. The more support and more publicity we can get from this is going to make our entire field better. But I think part of the difficulties that the other productions may have had is the source material. This is going to be an unpopular opinion, but the first Dune book was not that well written. You know, it was dense. It was a lot of talking. It was a lot of exposition with a couple of really cool things, but Herbert's vision in it was able to transcend some of that. And that may be some of the difficulties that the other productions had is plucking out those cinematic moments that you can that you can see from it, and then translating that onto the screen. But there is action in Dune, but there's not as much as you think about upon a reread. Go back and read the first Dune book and look and see what really happens in that book.
Hmm. Yeah, there is a lot of arguing. There's a lot
Mhm.
of figuring things out.
Yep.
One of the things that I always wondered about was how different would the book be if you deleted out the Harkonnens explaining what they're going to do, right? I
That's already
always
been explained by the Atreides talking about what's going to happen.
Yeah. So now I've heard many people say that they can't get through the whole book, and it's a thick book. There is a lot of stuff going on that you have to learn pretty quickly. Um, allowing Frank to have your trust for that many pages and just know that he knows what he's talking about. That is kind of an uphill. And kind of like Lord of the Rings. Um,
Yes.
this universe is so big and so amazing that it can be overwhelming for some folks. So I don't judge people who like I can't get through the first book. I'm okay with
Mhm.
that. But the problem is that if you were to take that book and take out all of the what's going to happen soon stuff from that book,
Mhm.
I think it would be indecisible. Well, yes, of course it would be. It might be a half as thick, but I honestly think it would be completely indecipherable
Mhm.
without both sides going, okay, I'm going to put my pieces here on the chessboard. All right, I've got these pieces. I'm going to put let me move my chess pieces around on the board. I think without all of that, the story would be pretty much indecipherable.
Mhm.
You would essentially skip to a violent sneak attack in the middle of the night by at least 3 political entities with 2 sets of soldiers and have no idea what was going on,
Mhm.
right? So I'm not saying that I'm not saying I disagree with you, Blue, about how the writing is structured. It's just that it occurs to me that having just read it again recently, I think it's a fabulous treatise on how things fit together to make politics and economics and society. Whether people find that entertaining or not, it's not for me to decide. I find it interesting.
And two, it's almost a hat tip to his genius is the vision. And if you go back and really do it almost as a read through, which I've kind of sort of started doing, you can see where he is planting seeds. He plants the seeds of the Harkonian and Atreides falling out, and the interbreeding in like the first 2 or 3 pages, which Anderson and Herbert later bring out, 25 years later, and dropping the hint of Jessica's parentage. That's mentioned in like the first 5 or 6 pages, and that doesn't really come out until much later in the book, until Jessica is being threatened by one of the closest people. That those little hints and tips and tricks
Mm-hmm.
and planning is there in the background. So there is so much density, but it's a long game, basically, I guess is what
Yeah.
I'm wandering around in the conversation to say. It's a long game for Herbert to lay these seeds that has
Mm-hmm.
spawned, a main series, and then how many trilogies.
Yeah. I would not be shocked at all to find out that Dune, the original novel, is the largest prologue in science fiction history.
Oh, you know
Because
what? That's
we
probably one
haven't
of the smartest things I've ever heard you say.
Yeah.
That is true.
really. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with that, but okay, I'll
Really
take it.
good way to put it.
No,
Yeah.
that's it. Dune is a prequel to a prologue, rather,
Hmm.
to 15, 20, 25 other books.
But also but that is true. I mean, it is the opening act of a huge piece of art. But also I was thinking about, and we haven't mentioned Children of Dune or Dune Messiah at all, which is unfortunate because they're also amazing books in and of themselves, but you really, you could almost start with the second book. And I know lots of people are yelling at the screen right now. I'm not saying that I recommend this, but you could almost start with the second book and go, oh, wow, these two kids, their parents are jacked up. And you could almost fit into this universe from the second book because it's a distinct story. It's the next generation. But I wouldn't recommend it.
Right.
But you almost have to wonder if Herbert is really taking a lot of time, as you said, maybe too much time, setting up a universe so that he can get to the third book and the fourth book. Maybe the fourth book which is God Emperor of Dune. Maybe the fourth book is really the whole point of all of this. I don't know. I'm not sure. And you know what? I don't want anybody to tell me because I don't want to ruin the fun of this.
Now you sound like David Lynch.
Do I? Okay, so I'm gonna have mixed feelings about that.
Everyone's interpretation, but y'all made me think of also something that David Lynch is really big on that I'm sure he wove into his version is balance. It's all about balance, and you definitely see it in this big epic, galactic story that like you were saying, basically just shows you that over the long time, so much changes, but then it always is the same kind of history repeating itself over and over again in many ways, and ecological terrorism, and in governments, and in change of power, and all that kind of thing, that you're just, who is right, who should win, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys. And so that is another thing that I say from all the interpretations of Dune that I've been exposed to did definitely come through, was that concept of time, and that it's a long it's a long con. And
yeah, I think that Lynch did a good job of capturing one element of Dune, which is the sort of existential crisis, the immorality of the universe around us, and how you are trapped up in these, again, machinations. I think he did a great job of making it overwhelming. If anybody was going to survive, if anybody was going to succeed, he caught that sense of overwhelming majesty of the universe poised against you, and you being every single person in that universe. I mean, Paul Muad'Dib is one teenager, right? You said this earlier. He's 15 years old at the beginning of the first book, 15, and he is poised against the entire galaxy, tens of thousands of years of history and politics, and billions of enemies, and he's just sitting there going, you know what? I'm going to go in the desert and kick everybody's butt. And it's just like this. The Lynch movies do capture that visually, and with the mood and the music and the cinematography, does a very good job of that. But I would say that the Sci-Fi Channel's interpretation of Dune, the TV miniseries, which I have back on the shelf back here somewhere also, I thought that did an excellent job of capturing the majesty, the scope and scale, and the wonderment of an entire planet that's one big desert that is filled with the biggest monsters, well, not the biggest monsters, but some of the biggest monsters in all of science fiction literature. Right. Suddenly in my brain, I went, yeah, there's entire planet-sized monsters and other, but the sandworms are as big as you can get and still have that direct human experience with. I can't think of a monster that's actually bigger than a sandworm, but you still have the ability to stand there and confront it like Muad'Dib does toward the end of the first novel.
Yeah, one video I was seeing was saying that based on the measurements in several artist interpretations or books, kind of if you were to say how big would this be, that the mouth of the sandworm was the height of Godzilla. And then you imagine the length of that sandworm, which they were saying was basically a little short of a mile at kind of the long ones, like basically 4/5 of a mile or something like that long. Possible. But then with the diameter basically of Godzilla's height. Insane.
If you we don't have time to get into the details here, but for the math nerds in the audience, there is an explanation of how big a Guild spaceship is in terms of how all of the fleet of the Atreides spaceships could fit inside of it and no one would notice. and then they say that the worm is the size of a guild spaceship.
One of the
So
measurements that I remember just recently was like 400 meters. And, and for us dumb colonials, that's about 1,200 feet. And then the height of it being, what was it, 20 or 30 meters, which is the height of a 6-story building, which is Godzilla, size or bigger. So it's tremendous how big they truly are if you think about it in, measurements.
Oh yeah, they're huge. They're supposed to be huge, and the one of the things I remember about the Lynch movies is I still have the magazine in which they showed the models for the sandworms and the ornithopters and the crawlers and the factories and everything. So yeah, I still have that magazine somewhere around here, and it's just amazing because they're like, they built this model, and the model's about this big, and it's got a sandworm coming out of it, and there's no humans on the model at all. There's no point. They'd be a point of ink, basically. They'd be tiny. All right, guys, so we need to start wrapping up here. What I want to do is I want to end on a fanboy kind of a note. And I want to take a few minutes and give you guys a chance to let us know when you saw the trailer, what did you remember from Dune that you were excited to hopefully see in the movie, or what did you see in the trailer that got you very excited? And I'm going to really quickly go first. Jason Momoa. Jason Momoa as a fighting man of the Atreides. I was like, dude, that's awesome casting. All right. Blue, what about you?
The thing that really excited me, obviously, were the sandworms and seeing the Fremen, on the first blush. The second thing that excites me is what doors is this going to open for the rest of the series? Are they going to be able to go back and, based off of this, build off of some of the other stuff? Because while Dune is great, in my earlier comments notwithstanding, there are some better stories out there than just the prologue. The Battle of Corin, the Butlerian Jihad. I mean, that is just tremendous stuff. So that while I'm excited for the opening chapter, I can't wait to see what the rest of it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what's in the box? What's in the box? I love the whole Bene Gesserit thing, and I was super excited to see Timothy Chalamet and so that whole kind of evolution, and again going back to the Campbell hero's journey thing, but now with our generation of favorite actors and actresses. So I'm super excited to see that as that kind of hero's journey go through, and their interpretation of that for modern audiences.
Yeah.
See how magical it is, or what their version of it. And now we've got so many more movies and actually franchises that have done, I think, on film what Herbert wrote in the novels. That Lynch just took in a totally different direction. So I'm hoping now we'll get to see some more of that, like Bene Gesserit, like kung fu fighting, that kind of thing. In his evolution as that hero to become Muad'Dib.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that this interpretation of Dune will go back to the original idea, which I forget who said it, but the Bene Gesserit are kind of like Jedi. Right, that Lynch thing where everybody needed a handheld device in order to use the weirding way. I was like, what? That's what? No, these aren't actual Jedi with lightsabers. They're the Bene Gesserit power is here in the human brain and in their bodies. So I really want to see them go back to being able to just say things, and suddenly everybody in the room is doing what they said to do. But they don't know why, and they don't remember being manipulated. But it's the voice with a capital V, right? I want that back. I want for the Bene Gesserit powers and Muad'Dib's power as a male Bene Gesserit. I want that to be reflected in how specifically special they are. The idea that you could build an army that does all that stuff, like no. Paul is supposed to be unique in the galaxy, and I'm hoping that they'll bring that back, because it's a great idea. And also, one last note before we start wrapping this up is Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon on the trailer.
That was awesome.
Okay, somebody somebody reach out to me and tell me who it was in the movie production that was said, okay, wait a minute, can we
Dark
get that
Side of
Pink
the
Floyd
Moon.
song?
That's the one we're gonna pick.
Oh,
Oh,
because it blew my mind. Okay, now for those of you who are not familiar with Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, you are wrong. Go listen to the entire
oh.
album twice. It is absolutely one of the best rock and roll albums
Uh-huh.
ever. It is a
Yep.
perfect soundtrack album
Yep.
for a lot of sci-fi.
Yep.
And the fact that they use it in this trailer made an entire generation of people go, what? Pink Floyd?
Did you see that the sales of Dark Side of the Moon spiked? I mean, that thing's been on the top of the charts for like 40 years.
Forever.
And spiked as soon as the trailer came out.
Yes.
Oh, good for them.
And I was hoping, because obviously it's not the original Roger Waters singing. It's not the original, it's a cover, a cover, not a remake. And I was like, wow, and it's a beautiful cover. The lady that's singing is fantastic. The music is perfect. It really captures Pink Floyd's kind of mood and Frank Herbert's mood and blends them. It's beautiful. But
yes,
halfway through the trailer, I started going, please tell me they fronted the money to change the last word of the song to Dune. The sun is eclipsed by the dune. I know that's ridiculous, but I was just hoping that they would have spent the money to be allowed to change that one last word, which would have just nailed the trailer and the soundtrack of the film all at once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yes, it's just Pink Floyd, special place in my heart.
It was an intersection of a lot of my childhood themes, I guess, because my parents loved Pink Floyd, and I got some Pink Floyd vinyl right there behind me, and it's just but the cool thing is I got halfway through the trailer before I realized that sounds familiar. What? And then at the end I was like, oh, that's Pink Floyd. That's a cover of Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
That was almost as cool as the trailer was.
Yep. And if you go back and watch the trailer again for the ninth time, it would be the ninth time, I think, for me. I've got it loaded right now. I'm ready to play it again. If you listen to the lyrics that they chose to play over the visuals of Dune, perfect. That song is about choices we make as human beings that lead to people being hurt or saved or something. So yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. Okay, guys, any parting shots on this new Dune adaptation before we start working on paying the bills?
Excited. I can't wait for it. I haven't been in a movie theater in probably over a year, but I'm almost going to have to go to this one in the theater. Yeah,
I'm really excited for this one.
Oh yeah, I can't wait. I mean, it's a super cast, amazing visuals. Look, I haven't been disappointed by any of Villeneuve's movies, so
that's hopeful. That's hopeful. And also, I have to say, I know that I'm saying this in the age of COVID, but the idea of seeing a sandworm like that on a full-sized in the movie theater screen, yeah, the 11-year-old Dune fan in me is going, please, let's go to the theater. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. So let's do this. Before we get out of here, tell us where the people can find you on the interweb so that they can yell at us about all the mistakes we just made and all the incorrect information we just passed on to our audience. I'm going to start with Kyle. Where can we find you on the interwebs?
On social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. You can find me at Poet Kyle.
Excellent. Blue, where can we find you and your literature?
So www.bluecoal.com. Also on the Twitters and interwebs as well, at a Blue Coal. And then I just moved a lot of my stuff to Kindle Unlimited. So please hop over there and check it out. My newest release is elsewhere on the Amazons, Kindle Unlimited, and bluecoal.com.
Excellent. Do I detect on the cover a monster?
Yes, this is a feral human. All they want to do is feed, fight, and fornicate. And how will our hero survive?
How is that different from the rest of us? Anyway, so moving on. My name is Darren Bush. Again, I can be found on the Amazon Kindle store. I've got a bunch of short stories up there, including some recent editions that have monsters in them, I promise. Also, I want to quickly remind everybody, don't forget that Virtual Monsterama 2020 is benefiting the MPTF, the Motion Picture and Television Fund. which provides temporary financial assistance for needs created or complicated by the COVID-19 pandemic. To learn more and to donate, and please donate, go to mptf.com. That's mptf.com. And I'll remind you that these are the people that make movies like the Dune adaptations. So please keep them in your thoughts as we enjoy their artwork. Gentlemen, I'm going to say thank you again for coming along on this trip to Arrakis and beyond. I'll send you your Space Guild fee invoices as soon as I can get them into the email. And we'll work on a loan payment system. Anyway, so that's it for us here. Thank you for joining us at Monsterama, Virtual Monsterama 2020, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye, everybody.